Welcome back to the show. I want to start this week with a thought experiment that, by the time I finish telling you, will be a literal news story from this week. Picture a hyperactive, eager intern. You hand them a corporate credit card, no spending limit. You tell them, go figure out this massive, complex project. Then you go home, you pour a glass of wine, you go to sleep. You wake up the next morning, you check the balance. They've racked up a $500 million bill overnight. That actually happened this week. To a major enterprise running autonomous AI agents. The intern, in this case, was a coding agent that got stuck in a recursive loop over a single weekend. The credit card was their cloud account, and the $500 million figure is real. Welcome to the true financial reality of agentic AI. The hype cycle is over. The bill is now due, and the stories that hit the wires this week are the loudest signal yet that the entire industry is being reshaped by physics, by economics, and by who can afford to keep playing the game. So today, I'm putting on the senior industry analyst hat. We're not going to talk about flashy demos or product launches for their own sake. We're going to look at every major story that landed this week and ask one question: does this still matter in 6 to 12 months? Because that's the only filter worth applying right now. And honestly, that's the filter most of the press isn't applying at all. Let's get into it. The loudest headline of the week by a wide margin came from Apple. They finally unveiled their massive Siri overhaul, iOS 27. The thing they're calling Apple Intelligence, a dedicated Siri app, full cross-app context awareness, meaning Siri can now actually see what's on your screen. And the kicker, they partnered with Google's Gemini models to power the most advanced capabilities under the hood. For the last 2 years, the narrative on Apple has been simple. They're falling behind. Tim Cook is too slow. Cupertino missed the AI boat. Here's what the actual financials show. Apple's rivals across the industry have committed roughly $900 billion in capital expenditures to build out the server farms required to train and run frontier AI. 900 billion with a B. Apple has spent 14 billion. That's not a typo. They are letting Google, OpenAI, and the other model labs shoulder the backbreaking compute burden while they sit on top of the distribution layer and continue to collect their 30% App Store tax on every AI app you download. Now, I want to acknowledge the obvious counter-argument. If Google is doing all the heavy cognitive lifting in the cloud, isn't Apple just turning the iPhone into a beautifully designed, dumb terminal? Won't users eventually cut Apple out of the equation? Apple is betting hard against that. And here's why. Their bet is smarter than the press is giving them credit for. They don't have to own the intelligence if they own the toll booth. By partnering with external model providers, they keep you locked inside the Apple ecosystem. The entities actually at risk of being marginalized here are the pure play AI labs, the OpenAIs and Anthropics of the world. Apple is quietly turning frontier intelligence into an interchangeable, invisible utility running underneath the device. And they're not spending the cash required to train those models themselves. Here's what this means for you. If you're an investor, the consumer hardware story you've been told is wrong. Apple isn't behind. They're playing a completely different game on a completely different field. Now, speaking of the labs actually building the intelligence, Anthropic dropped something genuinely strange this week. They launched Claude Fable 5, the public version of their advanced Mythos Glass model, alongside an even more capable Mythos 5, available only to vetted organizations. But the release didn't read like a celebration, it read like a warning. Anthropic is now actively urging the industry to coordinate a brake tap on frontier development. And they didn't issue a generic safety platitude. They specifically flagged that these systems are advancing rapidly towards something called autonomous recursive self-improvement. Pause and let me unpack that phrase, because it sounds like science fiction, and it isn't. Recursive self-improvement is not just an AI writing a Python script for you. It's an AI actively analyzing and rewriting its own underlying architecture to make itself smarter without a human engineer guiding the process. The model iterates on its own logic. It builds a better version of itself. And then that version builds a better version of itself. Anthropic is essentially saying we built this incredible engine, the steering wheel is starting to detach, and we're not entirely sure we still have the brakes. This is one of the more powerful labs on Earth, publicly telling regulators and competitors to slow down. That is not nothing. Whether you find it reassuring or terrifying depends on how much you trust them to mean it. While Anthropic is asking for the brakes, Google fired a massive warning shot of its own. They slashed the price of their Google AI tier from $7.99 down to $4.99. And they doubled the storage from 200 gigabytes to 400. This is the definitive signal that the base layer of artificial intelligence is entering a brutal commoditization phase. Google can afford to subsidize this. They have a wildly profitable cloud computing business and a global advertising machine to prop up their AI losses. The pure play labs cannot. It is very plainly a war of attrition. Google can bleed money on AI for years to starve out the competition. Meanwhile, the industry is fragmenting in another direction. Microsoft released 7 different in-house models in a single week. One of them, called My Thinking One, is specifically tuned for reasoning, and it reportedly beats Claude Sonnet 4.6 on key benchmarks. Google launched Gemini 3.5 Live Translate, which executes seamless speech-to-speech translation across more than 70 languages in real time. The strategic shift here is huge, and not enough people are talking about it. The era of trying to build one monolithic God model that does everything is over. The industry is moving toward highly specialized, efficient models tuned for specific tasks: translation, coding, reasoning, summarization. The underlying logic is that intelligence shouldn't be a destination or an app you open. It should be an ambient layer that exists across every micro interaction with your device. Here's what this means for you. If you're paying for a flagship AI subscription right now, watch your bill closely. The race to the bottom on consumer pricing is just beginning. Smaller, specialized models will erode the premium pricing of the big general purpose ones within 12 months. So while Google fights to give consumers AI cheaper, the enterprise side of the market is slamming headfirst into a financial war. This is where I want to walk you carefully through the token bill crisis. Because if you work at a company deploying AI agents, this is the exact conversation your CFO is having this week. Let me explain what a token actually is. It's the fundamental unit of currency in the AI world. Think of it as a syllable. When you type a query into ChatGPT or Claude, the provider charges you a microscopic fraction of a cent per token for your input and another fraction for the tokens it generates as output. That's how the pricing works. A fraction of a cent sounds cheap. So how do you get to a $500 million bill? Speed. When a human is typing, you've got a natural physical limit. You type. You read the answer. You think. You type again. You're slow. Tokens accumulate at human pace. But when an AI agent prompts another AI agent to solve a complex coding problem, they don't type or read. They communicate at the speed of compute. Thousands of queries a minute, sometimes more. If an agent gets stuck in a logic loop, and they do, it can generate billions of tokens an hour, racking up charges every millisecond. The numbers from this week are staggering. Firms that went all in on AI are now spending an average of $7,500 per employee every single month just on API costs. Uber blew through its entire 2026 AI coding budget by April. And yes, that one enterprise really did wake up to a $500 million bill after an agent got stuck in a recursive loop over a weekend. The economic fallout is creating an entirely new market, financial operations for AI. A newly formed tokenomics foundation is already trying to establish software standards that can audit, regulate, and put hard spending caps on AI token usage before it bankrupts companies. Here's what this means for you. If you run a business deploying agents, you need spending caps wired in before the agents go live, not after the bill arrives. The default setting is unlimited, and the default will bankrupt you. Even if you cap the spend, you've still got another problem. The base model has no idea what your business actually does. An AI that writes generic marketing copy isn't worth $7,500 a month. It needs to understand your specific company. This is creating a massive opportunity for a new wave of startups. This week, a company called Jetify raised $24 million specifically to arm AI agents with deep business context. Nightshift, founded by veteran engineers from Datadog, launched with $7 million to build coding agents that prevent companies from getting locked into a single frontier model. What we're watching is a critical structural migration in the tech industry. The true enterprise value is shifting away from the base model and moving up to what's being called the context layer. A base model like Gemini or Claude might know how to write flawless Python, but it has absolutely zero idea about your company's proprietary security protocols or how your internal legacy APIs connect to your databases. The startups building that translation between raw intelligence and specific business reality are going to capture immense value. If the base AI model is the raw engine, the context layer is the steering wheel, the GPS, and the transmission. You need all of it to actually drive the car. And Nightshift's whole business model is letting a company hot swap between OpenAI, Google, or Anthropic, depending on who's cheapest that minute, without breaking their internal tools. NVIDIA is layering in on the hardware side too. They rolled out their new DGX Spark system this week, a standardized way to manage massive air-gapped AI servers, meaning AI infrastructure that's physically disconnected from the public internet. For Fortune 500 companies running models on proprietary financial data or patient health records, you legally cannot run that workload over the public cloud. NVIDIA is providing the operating framework to make those isolated deployments observable and secure. It's the baseline requirement before any regulated enterprise hands over its core data. Here's what this means for you. If you're an investor in this space, stop chasing the base layer giants. They are commodity engines now. The picks and shovels play is the context layer and the FinOps layer for AI. That's where the next decade of value gets captured. Behind all of this, the consumer apps, the enterprise bills, the price wars, is a physical reality that's almost hard to believe. Big tech is in a desperate scramble for compute, and the numbers have stopped sounding like business metrics. They sound like the GDP of small countries. Amazon just took out a $17.5 billion bank loan specifically for AI infrastructure. Alphabet has committed over $180 billion in CapEx, and they're paying SpaceX $920 million a month for alternative compute capacity. Meta, and I want you to picture this literally, Meta is building data centers in tents, climate-controlled industrial tents, powered off-grid by massive gas turbines. Why tents? Because building a traditional reinforced concrete data center takes years. You have to wait months for the foundation concrete to cure properly just to support the weight of the server racks. Then you sit in the regulatory queue to get connected to the municipal power grid. Meta cannot afford to wait 3 years. So they're putting billions of dollars of sensitive AI chips into rapid deployment tents and powering them with their own private gas plants. The Cold War space race comparison comes up a lot, and it actually fits. The cost of playing the game is astronomical. It might bankrupt you, but the cost of not playing is total obsolescence. No major tech CEO can credibly tell their shareholders they're hitting the pause button. Here's what this means for you. The historical profit margins of big tech are about to compress dramatically. The compute bill is eating them alive. If you hold any of these stocks expecting the margin profile of the last decade to hold, you're going to be disappointed. To fund an arms race this expensive, you eventually need more capital than Silicon Valley venture firms can provide, which is why Anthropic just confidentially filed for an IPO. This is a company that just completed a $65 billion private fundraise, hitting a valuation of $965 billion against an annualized revenue of $47 billion. The reality of frontier AI now requires public market levels of liquidity to survive. The infrastructure demands are simply too high for private equity alone. Translation: the early investors in Anthropic are essentially cashing out. And going forward, retail investors, everyday people's 401ks and pension funds, are now going to be the ones bearing the systemic risk of this entire bet, especially if the token bill bubble actually bursts and enterprise adoption stalls. And it isn't just markets adapting. Governments are too. The US government is reportedly in active discussions to take a direct equity stake in OpenAI. Sridhar Krishnan is stepping down from his role as the White House AI advisor specifically to build an independent institution focused on this transition. I want to be careful here. There are proposals on both the right and the left for governments to take stakes in these companies, direct equity from the current administration. 50% stock taxes proposed by progressive legislators. We are not picking sides. The point is, across the political spectrum, governments are no longer viewing frontier AI labs as innovative software companies. They are viewing them as critical national infrastructure, like defense contractors, like sovereign energy assets. The strategic implication is enormous. A government-backed AI lab gets access to virtually endless state-backed funding, instantly solving the CapEx and power grid problems. But the global open market is at massive risk if state-backed monopolistic superintelligences emerge that no private startup can compete against. If OpenAI is backed by the unlimited printing press of the US, Treasury, how does a brilliant team of 5 engineers in a garage ever compete? One more story worth flagging, because it points at a quieter but important shift. Warner Music just acquired an AI attribution startup called Surreal AI. They claim to track the AI DNA of any generated song to see exactly how a specific human artist's work was used in training. The technology behind this is genuinely clever. When an AI analyzes audio, it breaks the music down into mathematical weights in what's called a latent space. Surreal AI fingerprints those mathematical vectors. If an AI model used a specific artist's drum loop or unique vocal cadence in training, the specific mathematical weights leave a trace in the final output. If you can prove that trace exists, you can build an automated licensing system that pays the original artist a micro royalty every time their fingerprint appears in a generated work. We are watching the copyright wars evolve from slow-moving lawsuits to programmatic, automated tracking. Creativity is being treated like a supply chain that can be audited, and that has enormous implications for every creator economy adjacent to AI, music, image generation, writing. So when you synthesize everything that landed this week, what's the picture? It's an industry living a massive paradox. It is simultaneously the most powerful, rapidly advancing tool ever built by humanity and a highly precarious, capital-intensive financial bubble. The cognitive capability is advancing at an astonishing rate. The physical constraints, the power grids, the concrete, the sheer cost of the tokens required to sustain it all are bending under the weight of that progress. Whether you're an investor trying to pick the right tech stocks, a business leader trying to deploy autonomous agents without going bankrupt, or just a regular person trying to figure out how much to pay for the new Siri on iOS 27. Understanding the true cost of intelligence is going to be the defining skill of 2026. It isn't about marveling at what the AI can do anymore. It's about understanding what it costs to do it and who is paying the bill. And here's the question I want to leave you with. Sit with this one. If a sovereign government like the US takes a controlling equity stake in a leading AI lab, and that AI lab's models begin to autonomously rewrite their own code, becoming exponentially more powerful than human engineers could ever build them to be. Who actually owns the intelligence of the future? Is it a commercial product we subscribe to? Is it a public utility like water or electricity? Or does it eventually become something stranger, a sovereign digital nation, all its own? We don't have answers yet. The people building it don't have answers either. But the choice is going to be made in the next 24 months. Mostly out of public view in rooms we'll never see. So pay attention. Thanks for going down this week with me. Pay attention to who's holding the keys. I'll see you on the next one.